A warm welcome to your session on decision making with the National Decision Model for Police Learning, brought to you by Solucius Equinox. My name is Phil Church and I shall be your narrator and guide for this session. Advertise your business or services within our learning videos. Targeted advertising to our learners. Please contact our team for prices at info@soluciusequinox.com. This presentation is brought to you by Solucius Equinox Training Solutions, aligning your training needs, and the SETS channel. Visit and subscribe to our online YouTube channel. The agenda for this session. After a quick introduction from myself, we'll cover the National Decision Model, its uses, the model and how it works, key elements, realities of using the National Decision Model, and there'll be session feedback. Our company background. Solucius Equinox were founded in 2018 after my co-director Jason Hunt and I left the police earlier in 2018 after 22 years and 15 years police service. And these are the police services that we worked for. And whilst in the British Transport Police we were recruit trainers for 5 years, training and teaching newly recruited police officers in law and procedures and training transferees. And these are just some of the companies and partners that Jason and I have had the privilege of working with since then. The aim of this session is an understanding of the National Decision Model. And by the end of this session, you'll be able to understand what the National Decision Model is, understand the uses for the National Decision Model, and understand how the National Decision Model works. The National Decision Model, an introduction. There are a number of ways in which individuals or organisations make decisions. There are also a number of different models which enable decisions to be made in a methodical manner. One of the models used by the British Police Service is the National Decision Model. The NDM is an evolution of an earlier model called the Conflict Management Model. The National Decision Model uses. The NDM is designed to make decision-making processes easier and more consistent. The NDM can be used by police officers and staff or at an organisational and strategic level. The model can be used for retrospectively assessing and making judgments on decisions that have already been taken. The NDM is a useful educational tool for individuals to learn from their decision making and the processes they used. The model has applications outside of policing and is a useful tool that can be adapted for other organisations. National Decision Model, how it works. The NDM pivots around a central axis, which contains the police service's Code of Ethics. Around the Code of Ethics in the central axis are the 5 stages of the NDM. Each of the 5 stages are interconnected with one another and are utilised in a clockwise fashion. Each of the 5 stages being utilised are linked to the Code of Ethics in the central axis. As each stage is considered, the user should then cross-reference what they are considering with the Code of Ethics in the central axis. The model. Code of Ethics. The Code of Ethics is at the centre of the decision-making process in this model. This ensures that there is a consistent approach to decision-making which is consistent with the police service's standards of behaviour contained within their code. And the Code of Ethics sets out the policing principles that members of the police service are expected to uphold and the standards of behaviour they are expected to meet. Many forces have their own value statements which are complementary to the Code of Ethics. Throughout a situation, decision makers should ask themselves, is what am I considering consistent with the Code of Ethics? What would the victim or community affected expected of me in this situation? What does the police service expect of me in this situation? Is this action or decision likely to reflect positively on my professionalism and policing generally? And could I explain my action or decision in public? The Code of Police Ethics cover two areas: policing principles, accountability, fairness, honesty, integrity, leadership, objectivity, openness, respect, selflessness. Standards of professional behaviour: honesty and integrity, authority, respect and courtesy, equality and diversity, use of force, orders and instructions, duties and responsibilities, confidentiality, fitness for work, conduct, challenging and reporting improper behaviour. And from the central hub of the Code of Ethics is the National Decision Model. Gather information and intelligence. During this stage, the decision maker defines a situation, defines what is happening or has happened, and clarifies matters relating to any initial information and intelligence. Decision makers, potentially everyone in policing, could ask themselves, what is happening? What do I know so far? What do I not know? What further information or intelligence do I want or need at this moment? Assess threat and develop a working strategy. This analytical stage involves assessing the situation, including any specific threat, the risk of harm and the potential for benefits. Among other things, decision makers should consider the objectives of preventing discrimination, promoting good relation and fostering equal opportunities. Develop a working strategy to guide subsequent stages by asking, do I need to take action immediately? Do I need to seek more information? What could go wrong and what could go well? What is causing the situation? How probable is the risk of harm? How serious would it be? Is that level of risk acceptable? Is this a situation for the police alone to deal with? Am I the appropriate person to deal with this? What am I trying to achieve? Will my action resolve the situation? Consider powers and policy. This stage involves considering the powers, policies and legislation that could apply in this particular situation. Decision makers could ask themselves, what police powers might be required? Is there any national guidance covering this type of situation? Do any local organisational policies or guidelines apply? What legislation might apply? Is there any research evidence? It may be reasonable to act outside policy as long as there is good rationale for doing so. Identify options and contingencies. This stage involves considering the different ways to make a particular decision or resolve a situation with the least risk of harm. Decision makers should consider the options that are open, the immediacy of any threat, the limits of information to hand, the amount of time available, the available resources and support, their own knowledge, experience and skills. the impact of potential action on the situation and the public, what action to take if things do not happen as anticipated. If decision makers have to account for their decisions, will they be able to say they were proportionate, legitimate, necessary, and ethical? Reasonable in the circumstances facing them at the time. Take action and review what happened. This stage has two distinct steps. At the action step, decision makers are required to make and implement appropriate decisions. The review step requires decision makers to review and reflect on what happened once an incident is over. So for action, respond, implement the option you have selected. Does anyone else need to know what you have decided? Record. If you think it's appropriate, record what you did and why. Monitor. What happened as a result of your decision? Was it what you wanted or expected to happen? If the incident is continuing, go through the NDM again as necessary. Review. If the incident is over, review your decisions using the NDM. What lessons can you take from how things turned out and what might you do differently next time? If appropriate, evaluate the impact of the decision on outcomes. Key elements of the National Decision Model, and remembering the key elements using Kayapur. The NDM can be useful for examining decisions made and actions taken, whether by a supervisor or during an informal investigation or a formal inquiry. Code of ethics. How were the principles and standards of professional behaviour demonstrated during the situation? Information. What information or intelligence was available? Assessment. What factors, potential benefits and harms were assessed? What threat and risk assessment methods were used, if any? Was a working strategy developed and was it appropriate? Powers and policy. Were there any powers, policies and legislation that should have been considered? If policy was not followed, was this reasonable and proportionate in the circumstances? Options. How were the feasible options identified and assessed? Action and review. Were decisions proportionate, legitimate, necessary and ethical? Were decisions reasonable in the circumstances facing the decision maker? Were decisions communicated effectively? Were decisions and the rationale for them recorded as appropriate? Were decisions monitored and reassessed where necessary? What lessons can be learned from the outcomes and how the decisions were made? The realities. Although the NDM is an effective decision-making tool, it may not be the first thing a police officer thinks about in a dynamic and stressful situation. However, it is still an effective tool post-event when notes or statements are being written. The NDM helps in the writing of structured notes or statements which will be subject to subsequent scrutiny. Why not check out our mini Points to Prove videos for more police learning? Only on our SETS channel on YouTube. We hope that this bite-sized law presentation was helpful to you, and we are always interested to hear your feedback. So why not leave us a message on our SETS channel? Thank you for listening.